So the first thing I want to talk about is just the supplies that you're going to see. And I also want to talk about the fact that we're going to be staying in one section when we're inking our plates, because this ink is different than the ink that we used for our other reduction print piece that we did. This is an oil-based ink. It's really sticky, it's really smelly, and to be honest, as a pregnant lady, I should probably not be smelling this, but so I'm going to show this quickly, but you might not see me in this room once it starts getting really stinky. This stuff does not come out of your clothes. So if you get it on your clothes, it's there, okay? So use a smock for this stuff. This is what it looks like. It comes out of like a silver can like this, very different than the other ones we used. You are gonna need a knife for this project. You're all gonna need a knife for this when you're working here. If this table is super full, come talk to me and we'll talk about using a second table. But ideally, like I'd rather us only be like 8 people in here at a time. If there gets to be more than that, it gets really, really hard to work around each other. You know what I mean? So in the meantime, Mrs. Sanders will be starting a new project with you guys at some point pretty soon. And some of us can be kind of working on printing, some of us can work on another project. So we'll try to vary that, okay? All right, so to get started, we have some weird supplies here. We have telephone books, which were great for this project. You're gonna be using these to wipe off the excess ink that you're gonna have. You have baby oil, which is the only way to get rid of this because this is oil-based. You can't use water on it, it's not gonna work. Trying to clean it with water isn't gonna do anything. That's why we use baby oil. It's friendly, it smells good, and it's good for your skin, right? So that's what this is for. It's a cleaning agent. You're gonna need some gloves. We go through lots of gloves in this project. Please don't go through more than 1 pair of gloves a day though, okay? So don't be grabbing new gloves every time that your gloves get dirty. You're gonna have to just work around it. Try to keep your gloves as clean as possible, okay? Extra paper towel. If for some reason there's not paper towel here, there's always extra rolls of it that's kind of like over by the cleaning section. It's nice to have it sitting right here at our tables. And also having trash cans all around us is perfect because we're gonna be using them a lot. You're gonna need one of these. If you're working with someone else, you only need to have, like, if there's 3 people sitting here, we could all share this. You're not gonna use this like a roller, like a brayer, like our last project. Instead, it's basically gonna collect all your excess ink. So we can just use one of these because it's a pain to clean this stuff. So try to keep the things that we have to clean down to a minimum, okay? So share this with a friend or whoever's working in here with you. The other thing, before I get started with this, I have to remember that I need to soak my paper, okay? So just like what we did with our first project with our monoprint paper, this paper that we're using has to be wet. The paper, the extra paper that you guys will be using, I'm gonna keep a stack of it right over on that table because it's kind of away from everything. It stays clean, it stays dry, all that stuff. So when you're ready for paper, you're gonna grab it from there. You're gonna put yourself a couple sheets in and they need to soak for at least 10 minutes. Okay, so it's okay if they soak longer, but like, so you have to figure out how long you're gonna be using the room today. So for instance, if I'm coming in at only a half an hour left, I'm only gonna be able to do 1 print. So I'm only gonna soak 1 piece of paper. Okay, but if I'm coming in with the whole class time, I might be able to get 3 done, so I can soak 3. If I don't get 3 done, can you please take out one of the pieces of paper and put it on the drying rack so it doesn't sit in the water overnight? If it sits in the water overnight, it's actually usable, but it gets really like grainy. So we try not to do that, okay? So I've got my paper soaking while I'm doing this. And so I'm gonna get started. So a little bit out of the ink, and you only need to have like a quarter of the amount that you're gonna need. So like a quarter size, like this. This is actually too much, but because I just freshly opened this ink, there was a piece of paper that sits on top of the ink, and I didn't want to waste the ink that was on it, so I just kind of spread it onto my thing. So this is about twice as much as what I need. Okay, so I just wanted to show you that amount. So, and basically you're just gonna take a knife, and just like you're spreading some peanut butter, you're just gonna spread it all the way onto the side of the plate that you scratched, obviously. Don't ink the other side, or you're not gonna get an image. So we're just scraping that side. Now I can kind of take it off. I can scrape it. So I'm kind of taking the excess and I'm moving it over to the other side of my plate. And I just want to do this until my entire plate gets full of ink. Oh, meanwhile, by the way, this is a good time for our gloves. I'm gonna put gloves on right now before I get too yucky. Also, one thing I didn't mention, is that I'm placing an extra piece of paper towel or 2 extra pieces of paper towel down so that I have something to rest my dirty plate on. Because if we keep putting this ink onto this paper, onto the table, the ink doesn't dry the same way that that ink dries. And so it might be wet for a couple days versus just a couple hours. Does that make sense? And you don't want a table that has a bunch of wet ink, because as soon as we come up to it, it's gonna be nasty. You're gonna get your stuff, you know, you'll get it on your clothes. It's hard to stay clean, and it smells really bad if it's just gonna sit on the table. Okay? So I'm kind of placing this down to catch any of the extra nasty ink that I'm gonna be using. So, going along, and I just keep scraping, retaking it off, re-putting it back on in spots that I need to. Almost done. Once I spread it all the way across my plate, then I have to actually scrape all of it off. The more you can scrape off, the better, because that's the less you have to rub off, because the next step is to rub all the ink off of your plate. You have to have a clean plate except for where all the scratches are. That has to stay inked, but all of this ink is going to fall into the little cracks, and that's what's going to produce our image. Okay, so I got it pretty good, and so now once I have it completely inked, then I'm going to literally take this and start scraping as much of this off as I can. This is where this extra piece of plexi comes into play, because we can reuse this ink. So this ink is reusable, and at the end of the day, take anything left on this plexi and put it back into the container. But like this, you know, if I was doing a couple prints, I can reuse this ink. And this is where I said if you have a couple people working at a time, we can share this and put all of our excess ink on one palette. That keeps our stuff down that we have to clean at the end of the day. And you will want to make sure you clean your plate at the end of the day. You're going to want to clean it completely. You don't ever want to store it with this stuff on it. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. I'm getting most of it off. Like I said, the more I can scrape off, the better. Okay. And Emma's a lucky girl because I am doing her first print for her. So the next step is to take your phone book. This is where I said it's nice to have 1 to 2 pieces. I could have even made this a wider space for myself because this is where it gets nasty. The next part is to take the phone books and to use the pages of the phone books to wipe off all the ink. The nice part about these phone book pages, I don't know why it is, but it absorbs the ink and it really does a nice job, better than paper towel, because paper towel will leave like a fuzz on your stuff where this won't. So I always go to the post office and they give me all their extra phone books. So I'm going to start cleaning this off. Now I'm not using the baby oil because the baby oil will seep into the cracks. We're going to use the baby oil at the very end of the class when we want to clean it completely. But right now we're cleaning it and we want to get all the negative space, all the spots that we didn't scratch. We want to get that perfectly clean. So this process takes 5-10 minutes just to clean your plate. Gotta use a little muscle. You can see here that it's starting to come clean. Okay, and you'll start to see your image emerge from the ink. And it's always the first few prints. So really focus when you're first inking these, because it's always the first 3 to 4 prints that you pull from your plate that turn out the nicest. The kids that, you know, either screw up on their first few prints or whatever, when it gets down to like print number 4, number 5, number 6, number 7, for some reason the contrast isn't as nice. I don't know if it's because the scratches like have already absorbed their amount of ink and they like don't want to absorb anymore. I don't know what it is, but so when you're first printing, make sure to talk with me or Mrs. Sanders. Let's really look at the plate really nicely and get it really perfect before we print our first few prints. So it's starting to get there. Now I might, at this point, I might just grab a fresh paper just because it's getting on the back, which then that's just more you have to clean. Thanks, Emma. So I'll just kind of lay that back down. Grab some more paper. I pulled out, just before I got started, I pulled paper out of the book, which is a good thing. It's easier, then you don't have to deal with a phone book with inky hands. You know what I mean? So pull some papers out, get it ready, get yourself all set up before you get started. This part takes a while. I wish I could fast forward it. Well, on my video I can. Getting there.
Do you have to rub the same direction?
No, rubbing doesn't really matter. In the end, I mean, you probably want to, but hopefully you don't have any extra ink that left over to really make a difference, because all the ink's going to be in the little nicks and scratches that you made. Trying to get the back off there, though. The back needs to be clean too. I mean, it's not going to matter on your print necessarily, but it's really hard to tell if you've gotten all of the, like in her sky, we're not going to want to see any extra ink or anything like that, or it's going to totally screw up a plate. So it's really important to have both sides clean just so we can see where the ink is. So it's getting there. Still got some stuff to go yet. This is a lighthouse, by the way. Okay, so in the end, after we print, you're going to want to have 3 finished images, 3 nice prints. I would say try to shoot, if your first 3 are really nice, then you're done. You don't have to print anymore. If you're having a hard time with a couple of them or they don't really look perfect, I would say keep printing until you have 3 nice ones. Usually kids don't have to print more than 5. Okay, now if you want more and you're like, you know, like I want to make Christmas presents for everybody, well, you can print more if you have enough time. Okay, one of the 3 images, or possibly 2 of the 3 images, depending on your image, one of the 3 final prints will need to be watercolor. You'll add watercolor to it, so it will become like a type of painting plus etching. If you have time to do more than one with watercolor, that's really nice, especially if your image isn't super strong in black and white. Some pieces are really, really nice in black and white and look a lot better just in black and white, and those pieces you only need to watercolor once. But some pieces, like sometimes there'll be people like that do images of people in the picture. A lot of times those ones look a lot nicer when we add skin tone and we add color to the piece. So those I might have you do 2 watercolor pieces. Just depends on everybody's individual work. Okay, we're getting close. So, but I can still see, you can see all the smudges in the sky and stuff. I gotta get all that clean. It's nice to work with someone who isn't doing the project and could just assist you. So like if we have enough time, you know, if there's a person in here that wants to just be an assistant for the day and help a few other people, it's kind of nice that way. Also, Mrs. Sanders and myself can be assistants, and we can help you with getting like paper, because basically you do not want to touch that paper over there with dirty hands. You got to make sure your hands are clean. So like I'm getting a little bit of ink on my fingers right now, but I want to take this off. I'm going to kind of save it at my spot. Now I'm going to wash it just a little bit with my, now like I said, the water doesn't work great, but you can use soap. If I really had a ton of stuff on my hands, I would need to use the baby soap. But I just want to make sure that nothing's going to wipe off on that nice paper. Okay. Now, because I had already set up my paper, I've got 2 pieces that are soaking over here. So I can take a piece out, and I'm going to use my blotting paper to blot it. So the blotting paper just sits right on the counter. Right now there's 4 pieces. So what I usually do is I leave a couple pieces underneath so that it catches all the water. So you can place your white paper kind of in between the 4 pieces. So otherwise on the top is fine too. You just want to make sure that there's at least 1 piece on top. But I always leave at least a couple underneath because it seems to soak the water up better. So I'm going to take out my paper. And, thanks Megan. Lay it down in there. The other thing is make sure you have clean blotting paper. If for some reason somebody got ink on the blotting paper, it will show up onto your nice paper and you can't get it off. So make sure when you're blotting that it's nice and clean. And I have lots of blotting paper, so if it starts getting yucky, just holler and we'll get out some more blotting paper, okay? So with the blotter, I'm just kind of rubbing my hand over there, giving it a little bit of pressure, but I just want to get any of the extra drips out. Okay. Now I'm good to go. So I'm going to take my paper, and I'm going to take my plate, and I'm going to walk over to where the press is, and then I'll show you guys how to run the press. So we can stop. So this press has 3 blankets. The top one's called a pusher, it's the top piece. The second is called the cushion, and the third is called the catcher, and it's the bottom, okay? Now there's a couple ways to print, and I think technically you actually are supposed to have all 3 blankets on top of your plate when you roll it through a press. But like I just researched that, and I thought, oh, but I've always done it with putting the plate on top of the catcher, which is the first blanket, and I've rolled it through, and I've always had great success. So I'm just going to keep doing what I've always done, even though technically it might go underneath all 3. With the blankets, they get inky and they get nasty, but it's our job to try to keep that nastiness down to a minimum. So underneath the press, there's newsprint paper. This paper can be changed up every single time you print. I would suggest changing it every single time you print so that you don't have extra ink left over on your plate. So I would just grab it from there, put it on top of the catcher, and then I'm going to get set up with my my adjustments on my press, and then I can put my plate onto the piece to go through. So with the adjustments, I redid this. So some of you that have taken my class before maybe haven't seen this before, or that you've seen it but we've never talked about it because the adjustments were always different. I kind of figured out which adjustments I want to use, and this will help you just to make sure that the settings are the same. Now, this is how you set the press. You would rotate these and make sure that this side equals this side. There's little numbers on each side of these little bars. And what I went ahead and did was I took a little blue pencil and I penciled in the blue line that needs to match up with the white side of the press. So maybe you can kind of walk over here and see. So if you notice that there's a little blue line and it matches a white line and it's on both sides of the press, and right now it's set at 80, and that's where we're going to have it set. In addition to be set at 80, these little bars, you should only see 2 rings or 2 hoops at the top of the thing. So like in this demonstration over here, you can see that I've got 2 little lines showing, and then it's set at 80, and that the blue line has to match the white line, and we're all set. Now, this would be really, really important if we all had different size plates. So if we were working on something that we had different thicknesses, we would all have to reset this every time that we were using it to whatever specifications we needed. But because we're all using the same plexiglass plate and the same stuff and the same thickness, this should be easy and we shouldn't have to touch this. So it should be good to go, but it's always smart to check that it's set to the right amounts before you print, because if it's not, then you just wasted a nice print and it's hard to reprint it, okay? So here we go. So I'm going to take my plate and I'm going to set it so that the ink is spacing up, okay? I'm going to lay it as close as I can to the inside of the press. I don't want to lay it way out here. I want to lay it as close as I can inside of here. Now, if there's a lot of people printing, you can print 2 at a time. You can print 2 up. So spacing them out as much as you can print 2 at one time, okay? I'm going to take my paper and I'm going to lay my paper over the top of my image, trying to center it as best as you can, but don't worry if it's not perfectly centered. Carefully lay it down. This is going to be a little bit crooked, but that's okay. And then I'm going to lay my blankets back over the top. Okay, and then because my press is set correctly, I can go ahead and roll this. There should be some pressure. You should feel like it's getting harder to turn the dial, to turn the crank once you hit your plate. You'll feel like when you've actually hit the plate itself go through. And as you go, you will notice when your plate has gone through, because it'll get really easy to crank. So there we go. And you kind of heard a little bit of a thing. Now the other thing is you don't want to keep rolling this until this is all the way at the end. You want to stop with a few inches showing. There's a piece of black heavy metal board that's underneath. You don't want that to fall all the way through. It's okay if it does, but it's hard to put it back in, so we try not to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Lift it up. And I'm carefully going to take my paper off of the plate. Again, just kind of like what we did with our reduction prints. We don't want to try to take the plate off the paper. We want to take the paper off of the plate. And because it's stuck underneath there, sometimes if I have a lot of space, I can just carefully rip it. Carefully. And here is my plate, or my picture, my print. So that turned out pretty nice. Now Emma can decide at this point if she artistically likes it, if there's things that are missing. She can go back and scratch still if at this point she's like, oh, I wish the door was darker, or blah, 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 blah. There are some ways you can still do it. You can go back and clean your plate as best you can, re-scratch in some spots if you want to, and then try to reprint. If she's happy with it, she can keep printing. So today, because the plate is already good to go, I don't have to clean the plate. I can just go back over with that ink again and keep printing and keep printing. okay? So then if I'm done though, then I'm gonna have to use the baby oil. With the baby oil, by the way, this is gonna go over to the drying rack because it's wet. I'm just gonna place it over here. Starting at the bottom of the drying rack, please. Don't put your piece at the very top of the drying rack. You wanna place it at the bottom of the rack. And actually I'm gonna stop here. Alright, so I went ahead and got myself some fresh new paper to set this on. And I also am putting my gloves back on the best I can without getting my hands all nasty. And at this point, you're going to take a little bit of your baby oil, and your plate can sit back on your clean paper. That's it. And you don't need a ton of this. Again, kind of like a quarter size or maybe a little bit more, but kind of spread out on your plate. Take a little bit of this paper and just kind of move the oil around and let it get inside all the spots. Now it will stay dark. You're never going to have it perfectly clean like it was before. The goal with cleaning it is you just want to get enough off that it's not gonna touch anything and leave ink anywhere. So like I'm not gonna be able to get all of this off. You're gonna see the image, but I can get some of it off. Now at this point, I can also use regular paper towel to clean. So once I kind of spread that out a little bit, I can take my regular paper towel because we're not printing right now. So I can take it and I can just kind of clean any of the extra ink out of there. So you can see it got a lot lighter, but it's still gray. It's not totally clean, and that's fine. You just want to be able to put it in your drawer without getting stuff all over. So, like, I would say that this is probably, I could get it cleaner if I wanted to, but I think I'm just going to leave it for now. At least I got some stuff on my gloves yet. So that's pretty clean. Like I said, you're still going to see a lot of the scratches, but it's clean enough to where it's not going to come off everywhere. Okay, now I got to take care of my stuff. Like, this is the end of the day. I definitely need to make sure I clean everything off. This needs to go the best it can back into this jar. So any of this extra ink, whatever we can scrape off, we want to put it back into this bin. And there's not a lot, so I actually used most of that ink. Okay, and then this is where it gets nasty. Try to take whatever you can get off of here. With regular paper towels, you can kind of grab it, take off as much as you can so you don't have to use so much baby oil. Same with this. We don't use tons of paper towel when we clean. So this is kind of a pain because, see, it doesn't want to come off super great. So at this point then, I want to take some more of that baby oil, and I'm going to have to get like 3 more of these. Almost out, I forgot about them. Grab regular paper towel, kind of let it sit on there, don't wipe it all the way off, just kind of let it get into the oil. And then wipe as much off as you can with your paper towel. And then you can use regular water and some soap if you need to from the sink to clean off the rest of the ink. And you just want to make sure you do the same with your knife. We don't want to leave this stuff on because it's going to start stinking really bad in here if we have everything full of ink. And then we would just throw away our gloves when we're done. Make sure our counter's cleaned up. These can be stored in that little bin right there, any of these extra plates. And our knives, if they're clean, they can either be put back on the table, or if they're really wet yet, they can be placed in that bin over there, that storage bin over there by the sink. And that's pretty much it.